We'll let folks start filtering in from the waiting room here before we get started. All right, good afternoon, everybody. We're having some technical difficulties. Alex Cashew's scheduled to join us, particularly an insurance specialist, and he's having a little bit of trouble logging on. But we're used to running on the fly here. I'm in my office in Colorado. Chris Roper, my partner, he's on en route to Farm Aid this weekend, but he's in Michigan, has been visiting some processors. So we'll cover this here and hope that Alex can join us as we go along.
Yeah, it says he's
This
in
is
the
a
waiting
real
room right now. Real quick, Nicole.
Okay,
Maybe if you can,
great.
I'll send him another link real quick by text.
I don't see
Okay.
anything. You should just be able to log on.
There he is.
There he is.
Alex is coming on right now. So while
Okay.
Alex comes on, let me just cover a couple of housekeeping items here that we have. First of all, we are recording this roundtable, so it will be put onto the Flower Hill website, so the folks that want to see it but can't log on live today can download that. Alex and Chris and I are the only ones that will be on camera and on mic. Nicole Mast, she's the wizard behind the curtain, so she'll be helping to run the traffic. But we do welcome all questions, but just type them into the chat and we'll get to those as we go along. Then finally, you're going to get a 2-question survey after the roundtable. Number one is thoughts on this. We'd like to get your feedback on how this session went, but also we'd like to get your ideas on topics you'd like to see us cover in the future. And I'll just give you a little bit of teaser. We're working on one. This is going to be more than a roundtable. This is going to be a regular podcast next month. But we've had some folks tell us that they'd like to see us focus on women in processing. And so since October is Women in Small Business Month, we're working with the Meet My Neighbors Productions to put together a podcast featuring some women. So just stay tuned for that. But anyway, now we've got Alex on board here and we're ready to rock and roll. So our discussion today is on risk management. Last month, we focused particularly on the food safety issues, HACCP plans, food defense, those type of things. But there are so many other risks that can be involved. And so we want to talk about not only the importance of having good insurance, but how to think about those risks. And I will just one example that I was involved with about 25 years ago was an enterprise. A group of ranchers bought a small processing plant that had maybe run 2 or 3 head through a day, and they were running now 10 to 15 head through a day. And those compressors, those coolers, weren't equipped to handle that heat going in there from those animals. They were old compressors and old coolers. Not only did they fail, there was a fire that destroyed, that facility. And that's just an example of the type of things that can happen. Chris Roper, my partner, Chris and I are the regional directors for Flower Hill Institute. And Chris has experience in constructing a lot of meat processing facilities and has been inside of those operating. So he has firsthand knowledge. And then Alex Cash is with Gallagher Insurance out of Oklahoma. He and Chris have worked together. And so Alex is going to talk about some of the technical stuff. But first of all, Chris, I'm going to throw it over to you because you've had a lot of experiences with some risk management issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And, over the past 20 plus years, and thankfully I've had some experiences with Alex as well, as where Alex and I got acquainted when he took over a position in Oklahoma and covered some properties that we were working on and managing. There's so many different things that can happen and so many different types of risk management that we have to look at. And so many of you have different operations each operation needs to be analyzed differently. Some of you raise animals, some of you have a ranching operation, some of you have your own products that you're labeling and selling. That could have its own set of risks involved, as well as the processing plants that we work with. So many of you are diverse in your operations and could have both. So some of you may have ranching, some of you may have the processing plants, some of you may be co-packing for other clients, some of you might just be doing a fee for service. So when we think about risk management, we have to think about everything that you're doing. And I don't want to share too many stories, but we've had a lot of instances where catastrophes have happened and people are looking at their insurance policies after the problem occurs, which is usually too late. So it's kind of like thinking about when a storm hits your house, then you're trying to get with your adjuster or your agent to figure out what you had covered. Or you had a car wreck and you figure out that, well, I only had liability on that car, not full coverage. So we need to be thinking about these things in advance. And that's why we wanted to bring Alex on board with us. They've been very good to work with some of the projects that I've had over the years. I wanted to bring them in and allow Alex to share some of his expertise that he's learned over the years. And just know that when we're thinking about insurance, it's not just property insurance. It's not just auto insurance. We have to think about, your general liability, your professional liability. We have to think about product recall. We talked about recall plans at our HACCP webinar a few weeks ago. And if you have a recall, what's going to happen? Do you have insurance coverage for that? And then, do you own that product, or did you own that product before you sold it? Or was that customer owned product? So you have customer liability, and then you have self-owned product liability that we need to think about and delineate the differences. So these are all conversations that we need to be having with your agents and your carriers ahead of time before something happens. I know some of you are experiencing disasters or have recently experienced disasters. I've been on some site visits recently where tornadoes have wiped out a complete facility, and they've realized that their coverage was not even going to cover the building, or it may not have covered the inventory in the cooler and freezer that was owned by a customer. We have clients, Dave and I both do, in Puerto Rico. They have been wiped out twice in the last 5 years by hurricanes. So when we think about those scenarios, what coverage should they have in place? I think about workers' comp. I had a situation many years ago where we had an employee volunteer to make a delivery for us on their way home from work. They clocked out, made the delivery, and were T-boned in their car while they were making the delivery. So we were back involved at that point because they were making a delivery for us, and that ended up being on our workers' comp insurance. So workers' comp is something we have to think about, and how our employees are even clocking in and out. We had a smoker one time that closed in the middle of the damper closed in the middle of a smoke cycle in the middle of the night and filled our processing plant with smoke, set off the fire alarms. Here comes the fire department. They broke in the building and found there was no fire, but the damage they did getting into the building, and then the smoke damage we had from the smoke damper closing on the smoker filled up the entire building. So we have to think about the worst things that can happen before they happen. So that's why we're here. And Alex, I'll allow you to introduce yourself and maybe give us some insight in the things you see. And I know you work on some meat processing plants, so we want to encourage people to ask questions today as well. And if you're in a particular situation, or you're thinking of a situation based on your region or your state, or just something that might have happened, don't be afraid to ask the question and bring it up, and let's talk about it. Alex, all yours.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me on today. Like they said, my name is Alex Cash. I'm with Gallagher. You may hear us referred to as Arthur J. Gallagher. Gallagher for short. We're the third largest insurance brokerage firm globally. And I think where I'm unique as an insurance broker in our firm, especially to the Flower Hill Institute and what you all do is, one, I've got a degree in agricultural economics from Oklahoma State. Still run small cow-calf herd myself with my dad, as well as being an insurance broker by day. So on top of that, I work with around a dozen tribes and tribal entities. And as many of you likely know in this call, tribal entities aren't just gaming operations, especially when you get outside of Oklahoma. There are many other facets and niches that our tribes can become involved with, and in this instance, it's agriculture, whether it's production crop, or cattle, meat production, poultry, etc. But it's a very unique industry. There's many people think of Farm Bureau when they think of food and ag insurance. However, and I'm just using them as an example. There's nothing wrong with Farm Bureau, but and things, brokers of that sort. But where Gallagher really comes into play is we have world-class product recall, food recall, trade name restoration type team members that specialize in this day in and day out. For instance, two of our largest clients in the, I'll call it food processing space, are the two largest suppliers for McDonald's products here domestically. So you can imagine the safety standards, the loss control standards, and certainly insurance program standards. When I say insurance program standards, I'm referring to the property and casualty program as a whole. And Chris did a good job of overviewing what that means. It's not just what it sounds like, just your property and just your casualty. It's, are we carrying adequate umbrella and excess limits? When's the last time we have reviewed our statement of values, our property insurance? Are we still sitting at values where we were in 2018, 2019? Because if we were to have to rebuild today in 2024, as many of you know, you couldn't rebuild, XYZ building for what you could have in 2018, just as an example. So, I'd love to open it up and just answer some broad questions. I think one thing that's difficult to do in the insurance space is to answer hypotheticals, especially from claim standpoints. But certainly willing to do so. And if you're not being prepared for and seeing your broker or even meeting your insurance carriers at a minimum by twice a year. We have many clients that we meet with quarterly. You need to be doing so, or you need to be calling us at Gallagher and allowing us to give you a third party program analysis is what we do all the time. We're happy to sign an NDA, review what you currently have, and then come back to you with the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I'll stop. That's enough about me and Gallagher.
Yep. So
No one likes.
Alex, yeah, a couple of things, and I jotted down one that you, I think, just addressed. But yeah, how often to meet, and you said yeah, at least annually to look at to review that. But
Yeah.
when you go into to talk with a potential client, how important is it for them? What do you look at in terms of assessing the risk that's already there that you're going to have to cover? What do they need to do to really mitigate, their risk exposure to allow you to provide them with a reasonable coverage?
Sure, Dave. Great question. So as an example, it's a perfect example too, by the way, Dave. Meeting with a prospective client, typically a first meeting, is an introductory meeting. Tell us more about your business. Tell us how you operate. Who are you currently with from an insurance carrier standpoint? Have you been happy with them? How have claims been? How have claims handling been? And how many options is your broker bringing you annually? If it's just one or two, and that's all you've ever seen, my guess would be there's some work to be done there. But and Dave, even when you're with the right insurance carrier, complacency kills, especially when we're talking about production agriculture. We just simply can't be complacent with insurance placements. We need to continually be analyzing and looking for new and emerging risks. And so, it's one of my favorite meetings because there are things that we can do at Gallagher from a niche resource standpoint that many of our competitors can't do. But you should be talking with your broker, and your broker should be preparing you for what the insurance marketplace is doing from a rate increase standpoint, throughout the year.
I wasn't going to harass you, Alex, but why have all our rates went up 3 times over the last 3 years?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, that's been difficult. And those are, as an insurance broker, those are the hardest conversations to have with clients, long-term clients of, just because your revenues are going up, and, we're in a hard market. You've probably heard that term before. It is difficult to deliver that. We have to deliver the bad news, and the insurance carrier sends us the renewal numbers, and then they allow us and make us go deliver the bad news.
Yeah, right.
So, we are starting to see, Chris, some correction in the marketplace. I'm not going to fail to mention that I'm in Oklahoma, as Chris did mention. Property varies throughout the country. Here where I'm at in Oklahoma is some of the most difficult property to place. Anywhere in the country, we're viewed as really as kind of coastal property due to our wind and hail exposure. So we consider it CAT property here, meaning catastrophic. And I don't want to just keep going down rabbit holes here, but we're not immune to cyber risk, cyber liability claims in the ag space either. Regardless of how buttoned up and however much multi-factor authentication we may have in place, cyber is going to continue to be an emerging risk. So number one, now we have to take care of and provide a healthy and safe food supply, for our fellow citizens, but now we have to worry about cyber as well, right? So, you know, a lot of difficult conversations on the horizon, but that's certainly an area that you need to be looking at and analyzing as well.
Yeah.
No,
I have,
that's a really interesting one, Alex, because I know on the cyber side of things is, you know, as our meat processing facilities get more and more sophisticated, they're using you know, automated inventory control and ERP, and even you can, you know, have your equipment set to be online constantly with the company that sells it so that they can do remote. And yeah, the exposure is increasing. I'm sorry, go ahead, Chris.
yeah, I was going to say, Alex, I've got two scenarios for you, and you can give us all some advice based on these scenarios. But the first one is a tornado victim that we work with, and that tornado victim was completely wiped out, and their insurance carrier basically told them that the max policy payout they were going to see was around $58,000 for the total plant. That was their total plant, contents, and everything. So they were not going to cover the meat, the actual hanging carcasses that were in the cooler. They were not going to cover the finished product that was ready to be shipped out, picked up. And they weren't going to cover more than a specified limit on the equipment. So for all of our attendees on the call here, they're in the meat processing business. They're going to know that, you know, $58,000 is not going to buy very much, even in a small custom plant, you know, that's just a few thousand feet. So can you think of some scenarios where not just you're meeting twice a year, which I do that with my insurance folks as well, and I still sometimes worry if I'm covered enough, but how do you make sure that your values are right and that your policy is for the right thing and the right amount, and that you're covered throughout your business?
Yeah, Chris. So, you know, unfortunately, that situation that you just, you know, explained it happens all too often. But it sounds like just a classic case of not being on the same page as your insurance broker. Not only do I want, you know, you, Chris, I'm going to use it as an example. When you know, being a former client, we met and we would go through your statement of values, and we would go down line by line, and you would say, look, I think we're a little light at the warehouse. You know, at any one time we may have $500,000 in inventory sitting on premises. We need to make sure we're insured for an adequate amount, and things of that nature. And you know, we oftentimes, you know, going back to Dave, your question about, you know, what do you talk about in an introductory meeting is, you know, one, we want to be Gallagher. We want to be looked at as, you know, your in-house risk management insurance partner. We want to be, you know, looked upon as your risk management department. But we also want you to have a relationship and know the underwriters and the insurance carriers that you're doing business with. So in the event of a loss, they have been on premises, they've done a walkthrough, they understand your business. And by the way, you know, for the you know, the tribal entities out there, they need to understand you know, the sovereignty that many of these entities may withhold as well. So, you know, to me, Chris, that unfortunately, more than anything, that sounds like that sounds like a swing and a miss from whoever the broker was. It needs to be a, you know, a rolling document, something that you keep track of throughout the year. Of, we added, you know, this conveyor system, and it was, you know, $250,000. We need to make sure that we have that adequately listed on our insurance program in the event of a loss.
Yeah. And I'll even add to that, with your documentation, so many people I deal with, Alex, their documentation is in the building that just got blown away, or it was in a fire that just got engulfed. So how do you all recommend that they deal with those records or pictures or videos? Is that something that you all can take possession of or get copies of so that it's in multiple places? What do you recommend there?
Yeah, so actually, I've got a feed mill operation here in Oklahoma. I'm dealing with a claim, and we have everything. We have all their statement of values. We have all their renewal exposure summaries. We know what they were insured for at XYZ renewal date. So, for instance, and they're an October 1st renewal, so we're right in the middle of going through the renewal exercise of, this is what we had last year, this is what we're projecting for 24-25. And when they say, well, we've been hacked or we've had a fire and we can't access our information, we have a pretty good starting point, because we do know our clients so well that we're the first call when there's an issue, and in a claim scenario, we're ready to rock and roll and make them whole.
Yeah, you actually triggered my memory. I've been reading some articles about a feed mill incident there in Oklahoma, and some of the things that can happen, but that happens in our food processing world as well. And that leads me to my next scenario is, say a plant produces product for somebody as a fee for service. That product leaves, and it ends up being contaminated with E. coli and actually causes death and injury to other human beings. What type of coverage would our plants need to be looking at to prevent themselves from just being buried in litigation on a case like that?
Sure. So on top of procuring and buying, product recall, stock throughput, lines of coverage like that, on top of all that is, and perhaps, maybe one of the most important areas of service from Gallagher's standpoint is our contractual review. Any vendor you have that is requesting a certificate of insurance or vice versa, we want to be intimately involved in reviewing these documents to make sure that these contracts that, Chris, that you may be signing as the CFO of a company, we want to make sure that you're not agreeing to something that is not fair in the event of a claim. So, I'm personally not an attorney. We do have attorneys on staff. But, we review these contracts from an insurance and an indemnification standpoint, whereas, nothing against any of our clients, in-house counsel, but we are more apt to review and only review the insurance language of these documents. So I would highly recommend utilizing contractual review from your broker, and if your broker doesn't have that ability, I would highly recommend finding one that does.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced that as well.
Alex, we talk about the insurance coverage, and when we did our HACCP roundtable last month, the participants talked about the importance of instilling a culture of food safety in these facilities. And from the other aspects of what can happen, I mean, tornadoes, hurricanes aside, things like fire, water mains breaking, those type of things. What are the type of things that you like to see your clients do to mitigate their potential risk exposure?
Yeah. So, I think first and foremost, is, Dave, do you have a business continuity plan in place? So in the event of XYZ loss, how long will it take us to get, Alex Cash food product manufacturing up and running again? How are we going to make payroll in the event of a loss? Loss of income. Those are all things that go into business continuity planning. And you all are probably all familiar with the term BI, or business interruption insurance, and extra expense coverage as well. So having a business continuity plan in place in the event of any type of peril, be it fire, wind, hail, whatever it may be, that's perhaps maybe the most important thing in terms of getting your production up and running again and having the least amount of pain when you're hurting the most. Having a business continuity plan is very crucial.
Yeah, and I've been a victim of that as well, Alex, and knowing that when that disaster hits and your employees are showing up to work and they have no place to work anymore, that business interruption insurance can help pick up payroll to even help keep those employees taken care of and keep their families fed when you, as an employer or building owner or property owner, when you don't know how you're going to pay for your building or you don't know how you're going to pay payroll, these insurance policies become very important the day you need them. So spend the time and review and make sure you know what you're getting, or ask the hard questions and have the hard conversations within your team.
Sure. And, Dave, one thing I'd add.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I was just going to say, one thing I think that is maybe underutilized from, brokerage partners is one thing that we have and provide for our clients just by virtue of doing business with Gallagher is our own internal loss control portal with over 100 safety modules to choose from. Our clients can select up to 10 a year just by virtue of doing business with Gallagher. And, many of those include, the lockout, tag out, foodborne pathogens, bloodborne pathogens, and things of that nature. And these things just all, it all comes back to the business continuity and planning for those black swan events that none of us ever think will happen to our company.
Let me encourage folks that are, tuned in here. We'd really love you to type in some questions, anything that's specific to your facility. And, we'll take those as they come in.
Yeah.
I just, and I'm asking you to look at your crystal ball here, Alex. I know we've seen reports around about, certain insurance carriers that are pulling out of some markets just because of some of the things that are happening. And we're seeing, more variability in the climate and more, frequency of some severe storms. What does your crystal ball show moving forward, and how can we in our sector of the food industry prepare for that?
Sure. Yeah. So Gallagher actually has, we've acquired a reinsurance arm in the UK. So you all may or may not be familiar with, the reinsurance market. So I'm just going to use Travelers as an example. So, you buy insurance from Travelers. Well, Travelers is buying reinsurance on top of that to protect themselves. So it's all a trickle-down effect, right? You know, when there's a lack of capacity from the reinsurance side, it squeezes the insurance carriers that you and I are familiar with, right? So when they have less capacity to offer, and especially, and then you toss in, you know, billions in catastrophic losses, be it hurricanes, floods, et cetera, it can be very difficult. And then, you know, who knew in 2020 we were going to throw in a global pandemic? So none of those things help. But you know, our team, our folks from home office in Chicago, as well as our colleagues across the pond, and even our domestic partners here, insurance carriers, we're really starting to see the market correct itself. And by that I mean we're hoping gone are the days of the 20, 25, 30% property rate increases, but rather you know, single digit rate increases now almost look like a huge win. Business owners are finally starting to be able, you know, get their heads above water and absorb the costs that are insurance premiums. So I'm cautiously optimistic on what to expect in the next, you know, 6 to 12 months. And we toss in an election year on top of all that, and you know, there can be some uncertainty in the marketplace as well. But overall, you know, I'm cautiously optimistic. And Dave, I've kind of got a question for the collective, and maybe you and Chris can answer it. But you know, I know it's heavily, you know, we're heavily involved at Flower Hill in the food processing production. Is everyone involved in Flower Hill Institute? Are they all Native American backed, or are all the entities?
We have
Okay.
a percentage. Our agreement, Flower Hill is a nonprofit that serves primarily Native communities, but the agreement we have with USDA is broad in scope. So, you know, I see folks on the line that's a co-op up in Montana. It's just a co-op of ranchers. There's one in southern Minnesota and northern Iowa that is a very unique poultry processing operation that is primarily serving some other immigrant communities. There's a plant up in the Northeast there that is, you know, a traditional. So we have a whole variety of processors that we serve. And again, that's why I'd love to have some folks, you know, type in some questions here if you have them. Otherwise, you can listen to
college
Brian
on it.
Alex
Well,
talking. Yeah.
Tribal
What's
College,
that?
Michigan.
Yeah, we have Tribal College, from Michigan. So, you know, this is a key area, and you know, I think Chris's comment at the beginning is the worst thing you can do is review your policy after you had the disaster. So we're just trying to help you, you know, think about this proactively.
Yeah. Something else that I see a fair amount of, Alex, more than I should, is, you know, power outages. And it's not just power outages from the power company, but sometimes some of our processors, they could have an equipment failure that causes the power to go out, or an equipment failure that causes their freezer or cooler to quit, and then in turn lose product. I think there's probably a couple different cases there, but the power outage, I'm assuming that would be probably a business interruption type policy. But would say a compressor failing on a freezer or cooler, does that fall under business interruption as well, or would that be something else, Alex?
Yeah, again, so you know, there's claims are so funny, Chris, because they're going to be it's a brand new you know, claim every single time. So from a utility service interruption standpoint, say power company, you know, highlight, electrical line goes down, whatever it may be. many contracts, if not, all that I've seen, there's typically a substantial waiting period before that coverage will kick in. So, power line goes out over here, it affects power to our plant. There could be a 24 to 72 hour wait period before we can make any sort of claim and recoup any dollars from lost inventory, production, things of that nature. As far as faulty equipment, compressors, things of that nature, there are certainly programs out there and mechanisms that do cover equipment, boiler, machinery, equipment and things like that. So again, it goes back to, we need to be reviewing these on at minimum annual basis to make sure that these things are adequate. Because Chris, as you may know, back when you and I were working together, we might have gone from 25 head of bison to, oh shoot, all of a sudden we've got 125 and there's a lightning strike. Well, sorry, Chris, we haven't talked in 18 months, or, at renewal last year, we weren't, made aware of such a large increase. So really a lot of it always goes back to just having that good relationship with your broker.
Yeah.
And we do have a question that just came in here. And this was one, and I think Chris, you can probably address this well, because you're looking at folks as they're designing their facilities. But I'm looking for a means of mitigating risks that are not insurance-based, but rather than procedural. I'm working on our emergency action plan and looking for suggestions on generalized risk mitigation. So let both of you guys kind of tackle that.
Yeah, I'll take a first swing here, Jessica. That's it's really important. And Dave and I, when we kind of plan out our webinar sessions, that HACCP plan and HACCP program that we talked about a few weeks ago is very important for that. From a procedural standpoint, that HACCP plan and your standard operating procedures program are going to dictate what you do, how you do it, when you do it. It's going to put checklists in place to help you, catch things that maybe might be missed otherwise. But also, there's just a ton of training that needs to happen. When we talk about sometimes HACCP training, those standard operating procedures are part of that as well. And even though a HACCP coordinator or a HACCP plan manager may not be suited to best cover every section of a HACCP plan or a standard operating procedure plan, they all need to be written in conjunction with these insurance policies that Alex and we are talking about as well. Because just a perfect example, when we talk about a power outage, if we know that our insurance is not going to pick up coverage for 72 hours, then should that not tell us that we're going to have an emergency generator in place and how we're going to manage that emergency generator, or who's going to handle the fuel, or whether it's natural gas generator or diesel generator? All these different checklists and policies and procedures need to be set up for your business based on even coverage levels that you have, and who's doing what, and how do you manage your cooler and freezer temperatures when no one's at the plant? Do you have remote dialers? Do you have high-low temperature sensors that sound some type of an alarm? All these things have to be thought about. And risk mitigation is obviously not just insurance, but it's a lot of it. And having the conversations that Alex is talking about, especially even after your business opens. But those of you that are building new plants, let's have this conversation now as you're building the plant to help build these checklists, these SOPs, these HACCP plans. And let's get on the phone with your insurance providers. Some of you all are with large companies, some of you are with colleges or tribes, or some of you are individual ranchers or small processors. We need to be talking with you and all of your support groups and people that help you so that we make sure that you're covered throughout. And whether that's an SOP or an insurance plan, we want to make sure that you're doing the right thing. And then we have people that can help with all of that. Alex, you have anything to
Alex? Yeah, I mean, Chris, I think the only thing I would add to that is, you know, you don't have to do it alone. If you don't know where to start, you know, the funny thing about insurance brokers is we get calls, you know, really oftentimes, we're their first call for a lot of questions that where, you know, a client or prospective client may not know where to go, whether it's you know, a legal question, an insurance question, finance, etc. You know, your broker should be able to provide a lot of these things for you now. You know, I know our internal loss control folks, they're not going to write every page of a safety manual for a client or prospective client, but gosh, they're going to give you some pretty good bones, starting points of here's what, you know, your peers are doing, and here's where we'd start. And Chris, one thing you just mentioned that kind of sparked a thought in my mind regarding contracts is you mentioned construction, and you'll remember this from your time from when we worked together. You know, in the midst of a construction project for whatever entity you're serving, builder's risk is an important piece of insurance coverage that you need to be aware of contractually. Oftentimes, the general contractor, for lack of a better term, will have that builder's risk. They'll carry that builder's risk on your behalf, and that'll be in the contract. Or it may be a one-off policy that you have to go out or need to go out and procure to protect yourself and to protect the project in the midst of construction. And it's one that oftentimes gets overlooked just due to the excitement of the new building. We've got GCs here, we've got subcontractors on and off our property or on location, and it's just something that's not oftentimes thought of.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Alex. I meant to bring that up earlier. Is a lot of your big contractors will bring that up to you because they want to make sure they're covered in a loss as well. But many of the small contractors, if you're just having a few contractors come in and do work and you're managing them yourselves, those contractors will not have a builder's risk policy that covers the equipment, the labor that occurred on your property. So if a disaster happens during construction, those folks are going to come back to you looking for payment when something happens or something's destroyed. Even for, it could be arson, theft, it could be any number of things that happen during construction. All these things happen. But you need to make sure that you have a builder's risk policy for any of your construction projects. You know, you could be an existing business and you decided to make an addition on the side of your building. And as Alex mentioned, if you're not meeting with your agent regularly, they're not going to have that covered because you had property insurance or liability insurance last year for this square footage and this type of business. Well, now you're adding 4,000 more square feet and it has new equipment in it that may not be covered. So that builder's risk policy will cover that during construction. And then once construction's over and that equipment is ready for operation, that should be rolled into your permanent policy. So all things to talk about.
We got a couple of good questions that just came in here. Mark up in Montana says, is there a way to contractually or by another means to limit risk on product our facility process, but then it's left our plant and has gone to another distribution center or is in the customer's freezer, and then is found to be contaminated, say, a month later?
Yeah, Dave, that's a good question, and I'm sorry I didn't catch who that question came from. But that's a great question. I think that's where Gallagher's competitive advantage comes in from a brokerage standpoint. We have, I'm probably a little biased, but our food products team is the best in the business in terms of analyzing your contracts with XYZ vendor and making sure that when that product exits your facility, it's now in the care, custody, and control of whatever vendor. They're taking that risk on, however that reads contractually. We need to feel good about, obviously, our process, and that we're, sending out good and healthy foods. But, if it's in a reefer truck, we don't know the trucking company that's taking it. It loses refrigeration, whatever it may be, in transit. We don't hear about it. 60 days later, we're named on, whatever news cycle out there that an E. coli or whatever breakout there may be. We're named, and we really, at the end of the day, had nothing to do with it. But unfortunately, it came from our facility. So contractual review, have a good products liability, food products team, in your holster, like we have here at Gallagher. And then there's coverage out there for trade name restoration. In the event you are named in the media, that you're protected against any loss of income due to that so-called negative story out there that may affect your income. So there are ways to guard against that. And I feel like I'm beating a dead horse here, but it truly goes back to reading the contracts, contractual liability, making sure you and your broker are on the same page in every facet of your business.
And I've been sharing some verbiage on that recently as well, Alex, and you can support me or correct me. But with our food processing plants, meat processing plants, we need to have some type of contractual agreement with our customers that states where our liability starts and ends. And if our insurance policy that we have with our reputable company is not going to cover your product in my freezer, then we need to let that customer know that. Or vice versa. If our coverage is limited to X number of dollars, we need to verbalize that and share that in a contract format that says what our liability is going to cover in case of an accident.
Yeah, Chris, one thing I can share with you or the group or to you and Dave, and you can disperse it as you wish. We have food products, product recall webinars very often that you all can sign up for and listen to, whether it's live or they're recorded, much like this session today. You can go back and watch a webinar on many different topics that I feel like this group would find very beneficial.
Yeah.
So we've got a couple other questions here. This last one, I have to chuckle a little bit because I feel your pain, Jessica. But and Jessica's adding this from the perspective they've had 2 fire incidents, so they've suffered through this. She says, what type of extinguishers would you do they need to keep in house? How many per square foot? What type of extinguishers? What do you recommend as something to have on site?
Yeah, I'll take that one for Jessica. There's a few different scenarios we have to look at, Jessica. There's a traveling distance to reach a fire extinguisher. So we need to help you look at your local building codes, and then we need to look at your floor plan. There's some general purpose fire extinguishers that you need, in your corridors and hallways. If you get into kitchens or anywhere you have, cooking going on, hoods going on, there's some specialty extinguishers that you need to have. But there's not necessarily one blanket answer for every room in your building. So we probably need to get with you separately and try to review that with you.
She says, how the heck do you get farmers to sign contracts?
I think I would make that, Jessica. I've had this conversation a lot, and I know you face it too, but when you have your cut sheets filled out, or when you have an animal dropped off,
Yeah.
just like you have to sign stuff when you drop your car off to get an oil changed,
Yeah.
you can have language on your paperwork that states what your liability is, what your coverage is, or none at all. And when they're doing that cut sheet or dropping off that animal, filling out their general information, make them acknowledge and sign that. So that's one way to get some type of coverage there, at least acknowledging what you have. They can fight it. You may still end up in court, but at least you're relaying that information, or trying to relay the information.
Yeah, Chris,
And now, go ahead,
I was
Alex.
going to say, to that point, that's great advice, Chris. And a great example that I use all the time is, people will say things like, well, when you go snow skiing, when you buy that lift ticket, right then you are, assuming a lot of risk as a
Yep.
patron. Snow skiing can be dangerous, and you're taking on that risk, flying down a mountain, you hit a tree, the back of those ski lifts, you're assuming that risk, much like what you're talking about, Chris. That could be an easy way to get them to sign a contract.
Yeah, even like valeting a car. I hate to valet a car anymore, but sometimes you don't have a choice. But you hate to even read that ticket they give you, because they're not responsible for anything, and you may not ever get your car back. But thank you for dropping it off.
Yeah.
So, and Alex, Danielle here is saying that you perked her interest on the webinars that you talked about that Gallagher does. So if you can provide us with some links or some information on that, we will send it out to our list so that people can tune into those.
Easy.
So I think we're kind of coming up to time here, and I think this has been a really, really good discussion. I would just say one of the things that, we talked about here, and we can work with you as you're designing the facilities, but it goes back to those, one of the things that you can't measure or you can't assess what you're not monitoring. And there's so much out there now that you can build into your facilities. Chris mentioned it, things to let you know that if the power goes out or if the temperature drops, and things that are easy enough to even come up then on your phone and give you those alerts, because it seems that those things always happen after the facility is closed. They're not happening during working hours a lot of times. So again, as much as we can work with you to design that in when you're developing your facilities, we'll work with you. Alex, we really appreciate you being with us today. It was really helpful. We didn't mean to make this informational for Gallagher, but we actually asked some other carriers to join us, and they were thinking that if they said something on this roundtable, that was going to be binding coverage or whatever. So, Alex,
Sure.
we really appreciate it. Chris, anything you want to wrap up with?
No, we appreciate it. There are so many things to think about when you think about risk management, and when there's no way for us to cover them all in an hour. If you have specific instances that you need help with or want to talk about, please reach out to us. If you want to get in touch with Alex, we'll make sure you get his email, contact information. If you want to share that in the chat, Alex, feel free. But we want to make sure that you're getting your project set up correctly, and that your long-term operations are set up correctly. Dave says this to you all every time, but we're here for the long haul, and we want you all to be successful. So please reach out to us anytime you have a question.
And yeah, I apologize. We usually have a slide at the end with the contact information, and we got a little sideline getting ready for this. So, but we will get Alex. We'll get your information out to folks as well,
Yeah.
so that they can contact you. And again, we appreciate folks. We ask you to look forward to our podcast coming up next month on women in meat processing, and you'll get your 2-question survey. We really want to get some input from you on things you'd like to see us cover. We've been doing about one of these roundtables a month, and so we want to make sure we're covering the topics that are pertinent to you. So with that, we ask everybody to have a great afternoon, and thank you for tuning in.
So long, guys. Nice to meet you.